Marcus Thompson had always believed that the worst day of his life was when his wife Sarah died in that car accident 3 years ago. He was wrong. The worst day was when he woke up in a strange, glowing chamber with walls that seemed to breathe and pulse like living tissue. The last thing he remembered was driving home from his job at the observatory late one night. He had been working on cataloging distant star systems when a brilliant light filled his car. Now he found himself lying on what felt like a soft, warm surface that molded itself to his body. The air tasted different here, cleaner somehow, with a faint metallic tang that made his tongue tingle. Marcus sat up slowly, his head spinning. The chamber was roughly circular, maybe 20 feet across, with no visible doors or windows. The walls glowed with a soft blue-green light that seemed to come from within the material itself. Strange symbols flickered across the surfaces like living text, constantly changing and shifting in patterns that hurt his eyes to follow. He tried to stand but stumbled, his legs weak and unsteady. How long had he been unconscious? Hours? Days? There was no way to tell in this place where artificial light made it impossible to judge the passage of time. His watch was gone, along with his wallet, keys, and everything else he had been carrying. The silence was complete except for a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the floor and into his bones. It was not unpleasant, almost musical, but it made him feel like he was inside some vast machine or organism. The sound rose and fell in gentle waves, like the breathing of something enormous. Marcus explored every inch of the chamber, running his hands along the smooth walls, searching for any kind of opening or control panel. The material felt warm and slightly yielding under his touch, not quite like metal or plastic, but something entirely foreign. When he pressed harder against certain sections, the glow would intensify slightly, as if responding to his presence. He called out, his voice echoing strangely in the space. "Hello, is anyone there? What do you want with me?" But only silence answered him. Food appeared without warning. One moment there was nothing. The next a section of the wall had opened to reveal a small alcove containing what looked like a tray of colorful, geometric shapes. Marcus approached cautiously. The items on the tray looked nothing like any food he had ever seen. Some were translucent cubes that glowed faintly from within. Others were spiral-shaped objects that seemed to shift and move slightly when he was not looking directly at them. His stomach growled loudly. He had no idea how long it had been since he had eaten, and despite his fear and confusion, hunger was becoming impossible to ignore. He picked up one of the glowing cubes and examined it closely. It felt slightly warm and had a pleasant, sweet smell that reminded him of honey and fresh bread. Taking a deep breath, Marcus bit into it. The texture was unlike anything he had ever experienced, somehow both solid and liquid at the same time. It dissolved on his tongue, releasing flavors that were completely alien yet surprisingly pleasant. Within moments of swallowing, he felt a surge of energy and well-being that made his head clear and his body feel stronger. He ate several more of the strange food items, each one different but equally nourishing. Some tasted like fruits that did not exist on Earth. Others had savory flavors that reminded him of the best meals he had ever eaten, but richer and more complex. Whatever these things were, they satisfied his hunger completely and left him feeling more energetic than he had in years. Days passed, though Marcus could only guess at the time by counting his sleep cycles. The chamber provided everything he needed. The walls dispensed water that was purer and more refreshing than anything he had ever tasted. When he needed to relieve himself, a section of the floor would open to reveal what was obviously some kind of waste disposal system, though it worked in ways he could not begin to understand. The temperature remained perfectly comfortable, and the air always felt fresh and clean. It was like being in the most advanced life support system imaginable, designed by minds that understood biological needs better than humans understood themselves. But the most unsettling thing about his captivity was not the alien technology or even his helplessness. It was the growing certainty that he was being watched. At first, it was just a feeling, that prickling sensation on the back of his neck that told him eyes were upon him. But as the days wore on, it became more obvious. Sometimes the symbols on the walls would flicker and change when he moved, as if tracking his position. Other times, he would catch glimpses of what might have been lenses or sensors appearing and disappearing in the walls. Marcus began talking to his unseen watchers, partly from loneliness and partly from a desperate hope that communication might be possible. He told them about his life, about his work studying the stars, about Sarah, and how much he missed her. He described Earth and human culture, trying to make them understand what it meant to be human. "I know you're listening," he would say to the walls. "I don't understand why you've taken me, but I'm not your enemy. I'm just a man who looks at the stars and wonders what's out there. Maybe that's why you chose me, because I've always believed there was other life in the universe." He received no response, but somehow he felt that his words were being heard and considered. On what he estimated was his 7th day in captivity, everything changed. Marcus had fallen asleep on the soft, warm surface that served as his bed when he was awakened by a new sound. The constant humming had stopped, replaced by a deeper, more complex series of tones that seemed to carry meaning, though he could not decipher it. The walls began to glow more brightly, and the symbols moved faster across their surfaces. Then, the wall in front of him began to change. The smooth surface rippled like water, and slowly, a figure began to emerge from it as if the wall itself was giving birth. Marcus scrambled backward, his heart hammering as he watched something impossible happen before his eyes. The figure that emerged was clearly not human, but it was beautiful in a way that made his breath catch in his throat. She was tall, perhaps 7 feet in height, with proportions that were similar to a human, but somehow more elegant and graceful. Her skin had a pale, luminescent quality that seemed to generate its own soft light. Her hair, if it could be called hair, flowed around her head and shoulders like liquid silver, moving constantly as if blown by an unfelt breeze. But it was her eyes that captured and held his attention. They were large and luminous, a deep violet color that seemed to contain depths he could fall into forever. There was intelligence in those eyes, ancient and profound, but also something else. Curiosity? Compassion? He could not be sure. She wore what appeared to be a garment that was part clothing, part living organism. It flowed around her body like liquid metal, sometimes opaque, sometimes translucent, constantly shifting and changing color from silver to deep blue to gold. Delicate patterns moved across its surface like bioluminescent displays in the deep ocean. For long moments, they simply stared at each other. Marcus felt frozen in place, caught between wonder and terror. This was clearly an alien being, probably his captor, yet there was something about her presence that calmed rather than frightened him. When she finally spoke, her voice was unlike anything he had ever heard. It was beautiful, musical with harmonics and overtones that human vocal cords could never produce. But somehow, impossibly, he understood her words. "Do not be afraid, Marcus Thompson of Earth. You are safe here." The fact that she knew his name sent a chill down his spine, but her voice carried such genuine warmth and reassurance that his terror began to ebb. "How do you know my name? How can I understand you? We have been studying your species for many cycles, learning your languages, your customs, your ways of thinking. As for understanding, the Chamber has been analyzing your neural patterns since you arrived. It now translates our speech directly into concepts your mind can grasp." Marcus struggled to process this information. "We? How many of you are there? And why have you taken me?" She moved closer, and he noticed that she did not quite walk like a human. She seemed to glide across the floor, her movements fluid and graceful in a way that was almost hypnotic. "I am Zarathel, Queen of the Veltar. You have not been taken, Marcus Thompson. You have been saved." "Saved? Saved from what?" Her expression grew sad, those magnificent eyes dimming slightly. "Your world is in great danger, though your people do not yet know it. A force approaches that has destroyed countless civilizations. We have been watching, hoping to find individuals who might help prevent the catastrophe that awaits your species. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. What kind of danger? What force? That is a conversation for another time, Zarathel said gently. For now, you must understand that you are here as our guest, not our prisoner. You may move freely within this ship, and you will be provided with everything you need. But I must ask for your patience as we determine whether you are indeed the one we have been seeking. The one you've been seeking? For what? She studied him for a long moment with those penetrating violet eyes. Your people call it many names. Destiny. Fate. The convergence of possibilities that creates change in the universe. We call it the nexus of becoming. And you, Marcus Thompson, may be the key to saving both our peoples. Before he could ask what she meant, Zarathel began to fade, becoming translucent, and then invisible as she merged back into the wall. Rest now. Her voice echoed in the chamber, even after she had disappeared. Tomorrow, you'll begin to learn why the universe has brought us together. Marcus stood alone in the chamber, his mind reeling from the encounter. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this moment. He was apparently aboard an alien spaceship, speaking with the queen of an alien race, and somehow involved in preventing some cosmic catastrophe. But despite the impossibility of his situation, he felt something he had not experienced since Sarah's death. He felt purpose. For the first time in 3 years, he was not just existing, but potentially part of something greater than himself. The chamber dimmed as if recognizing his need for sleep, and Marcus laid down on the warm, supportive surface. As he closed his eyes, he found himself thinking not about his fear or confusion, but about the sadness he had seen in Zarathel's extraordinary eyes. Whatever this danger was that threatened Earth, it clearly weighed heavily on her mind as well. He fell asleep, wondering what tomorrow would bring, and whether he could possibly be the person these aliens believed him to be. Outside the chamber, systems monitored his vital signs and brain activity, recording data that would help determine the fate of 2 very different species. The next morning, if morning was the right word in a place without sunrise, Marcus awoke to find that his chamber had changed. Where there had been only one room before, passages now led off in 3 different directions. Each passage glowed with a different color of light, creating an invitation to explore. He chose the passage that glowed with warm golden light, and found himself in a vast space that took his breath away. The ceiling stretched up impossibly high, and the walls were transparent, giving him his first view of the space outside the ship. Stars wheeled past in patterns he did not recognize, and in the distance, a nebula painted cosmic clouds in brilliant colors. But it was not the view of space that stunned him. It was the realization of just how massive this ship truly was. Through the transparent walls, he could see other sections of the vessel stretching away in all directions, some as large as city blocks, others configured in geometric shapes that hurt to look at too closely. Impressive, is it not? Zarathel's voice came from behind him, and he turned to find her emerging from what had appeared to be empty air. It's incredible, Marcus breathed. How large is this ship? Large enough to house our entire civilization, she replied. We are a nomadic people now, Marcus Thompson. We have been traveling among the stars for longer than your species has existed, searching for others who might stand with us against the darkness that approaches. She gestured to the view outside, and, as she did, Marcus noticed that her hands were not quite human either. Her fingers were longer and more delicate, ending in what might have been claws or simply very pointed nails that gleamed like polished metal. Tell me about this darkness, Marcus said. If Earth is really in danger, don't we have a right to know? To prepare. Zarathel was quiet for a long time, her luminous eyes reflecting the starlight outside. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. How do you prepare an entire world for something that has never been successfully defeated? How do you explain to a species that has barely begun to explore space that their sun, their planets, their very existence is under threat from beings that consume realities the way your people consume food? The words sent ice through Marcus's veins, but before he could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The lights changed from golden to harsh red, and symbols flashed urgently across every surface. Zarathel's expression transformed from sad resignation to sharp alertness. "They have found us sooner than we expected," she said, her voice now carrying the unmistakable authority of a ruler preparing for battle. "Marcus Thompson, your testing must begin immediately. There is no more time for gradual preparation. What's happening? Who has found you?" She was already moving toward one of the passages, her liquid garment shifting to what looked like armor made of flowing light. "The Devourers, Marcus Thompson, the darkness I spoke of. They have detected our presence in this system, and they are coming." Marcus ran to keep up with her impossibly long strides. "But what can I possibly do against something like that? I'm just one human. I study stars for a living." Zarathel stopped abruptly and turned to face him, her violet eyes blazing with intensity. "You study stars, yes. But more than that, you are the one who lost everything and yet still looks up at the night sky with hope rather than despair. You are the one whose mind reaches out to touch the infinite even in the depths of grief. That quality, that reaching towards something greater than yourself, is exactly what we need." She placed her hands on his shoulders, and he felt a strange tingling sensation, as if energy was flowing between them. "In the next few hours, you will discover abilities you never knew you possessed. But, more importantly, you will discover whether the love you carry for your lost wife is strong enough to extend to an entire universe." Before he could ask what she meant, they arrived at what was obviously the ship's command center. The space was vast and filled with incomprehensible technology. Other beings moved with urgent purpose among complex controls that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. These others looked similar to Zarathel, but were clearly not of royal status. They wore simpler versions of the living garments, and their eyes, while still luminous, lacked the depth and intensity of their queens. In the center of the room, a massive display showed space around the ship. At first, Marcus saw only stars, but then Zarathel touched a control, and the view changed. Dark shapes moved among the distant asteroids, shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Even at this distance, there was something profoundly wrong about them, something that made every instinct scream danger. "The Devourers," Zarathel said quietly. "They have been hunting us for decades, trying to prevent us from finding the one who might stand against them. Today, we learn whether our search has been successful or whether the universe is about to lose its last hope." Marcus stared at the approaching darkness and felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders. Everything he thought he knew about his life, about reality itself, was crumbling around him. But in the depths of his fear, he found something unexpected. He found determination. Sarah had always said that the bravest thing was not the absence of fear, but action in spite of fear. If these beings believed he could make a difference, if there was even a chance he could help prevent the destruction of Earth and countless other worlds, then he had to try. "Tell me what I need to do," he said to Zarathel, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. She smiled for the first time since he had met her, and it transformed her face from merely beautiful to radiant. "Now you begin to understand why we chose you, Marcus Thompson. The testing begins immediately." The testing chamber was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. As Zarathel led him through corridors that seemed to shift and change around them, he realized that the ship itself was alive in ways that defied his understanding. The walls pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns, and the floor felt warm beneath his feet, as if he was walking through the bloodstream of some vast organism. They arrived at a circular room where the walls, floor, and ceiling were all transparent, giving the illusion of floating in open space. The stars wheeled around them in their slow, eternal dance, and Marcus felt a familiar sense of wonder that had drawn him to astronomy in the first place. But now that wonder was tinged with terror as he remembered the dark shapes approaching through the void. "Before we begin," Zarathel said, her voice softer now, more personal, "you must understand what we are asking of you. The abilities that lie dormant within your species are not magic, though they may seem so to minds that think in terms of your current science. They are natural forces that exist throughout the universe, accessible to any consciousness that learns to perceive beyond the limitations of purely physical senses. She gestured, and the transparent walls began displaying images. Marcus saw civilizations across the galaxy, beings of countless different forms and configurations, but all sharing one thing in common. They possessed a kind of radiance, an inner light that allowed them to manipulate reality in subtle but profound ways. "Your wife, Sarah," Zarathel said gently, and Marcus jerked in surprise. "Yes, we know about her. We know about the love you shared, the plans you made together, the future that was stolen from you. But what you do not know is that Sarah was beginning to develop these same abilities before her death." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "What are you talking about? Sarah was a teacher, not some kind of psychic or whatever you're suggesting. Was she not the one who always seemed to know when you were troubled, even when you tried to hide it? Did she not have dreams about places she had never been, people she had never met? Did you never notice how plants seemed to thrive in her presence, how animals were drawn to her, how even strangers found themselves confiding their deepest secrets to her within minutes of meeting her?" Marcus felt his knees go weak as memories flooded back. Sarah had always been unusually empathetic, almost to the point where it sometimes overwhelmed her. She would come home from teaching emotionally drained because she could feel every one of her students' problems as if they were her own. And yes, she did have vivid dreams about distant places, dreams so detailed that she could describe them like travel brochures. "The accident that killed her," Zarathel continued, her voice heavy with compassion, "was not truly an accident. The Devourers have agents on every world they plan to consume. They seek out those who show signs of developing expanded consciousness and eliminate them before they can reach their full potential. Sarah was murdered because she was becoming a threat to their plans." The rage that erupted in Marcus was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It started in his chest as a burning sensation and spread outward through every nerve and muscle. The air around him began to shimmer, and several of the displays in the room flickered and sparked. "She was innocent," he shouted, his voice echoing strangely in the chamber. "She never hurt anyone. All she wanted was to help children learn and grow." "Yes," Zarathel said, and there were tears in her luminous eyes. "And that is exactly why they killed her. Love, compassion, the desire to nurture and protect others. These are the very qualities that make your species dangerous to the Devourers. They feed on despair, fear, and hopelessness. They cannot consume worlds where love is strong enough to fight back." The displays around the room were now showing scenes from Earth, but not the Earth Marcus knew. This was Earth as it might be in the near future. Cities lay in ruins beneath a sky that was the color of old blood. People wandered through the wreckage like walking corpses, their eyes empty of hope or purpose. In the distance, massive shapes moved through the devastation, shapeless beings that seemed to drain the very life from everything they touched. "This is what the Devourers bring," Zarathel said. "Not just death, but the complete elimination of everything that makes life worth living. They consume hope itself, leaving behind only hollow shells that exist without truly being alive." Marcus stared at the horrifying visions, feeling sick to his stomach. But underneath the nausea and terror, something else was growing, a determination that surprised him with its intensity. "How do we stop them?" "We fight them the only way they can be fought," Zarathel replied. "With the power that your wife was beginning to discover, the power that lies dormant within you and others like you. But first, you must learn to access it." She moved to the center of the chamber and held out her hands toward him. "Think of Sarah. Remember not just how she looked or the sound of her voice, but how she made you feel. Remember the love that connected you, the way your hearts beat in sync when you held each other, the way you could communicate without words." Marcus closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him. Sarah's laugh, bright and infectious. The way she would scrunch up her nose when she was concentrating on something difficult. How she would curl up against him on the couch while they watched movies, her head finding that perfect spot on his shoulder. The last time he had told her he loved her, rushing out the door for work and not knowing it would be the last time. The grief came, as it always did, but this time it was different. Instead of the empty, aching loss that had haunted him for 3 years, there was something warm and alive in it. The love itself, still present, still real, even though Sarah was gone. Feel that connection. Zarathel's voice seemed to come from inside his own head now. Love does not die when the beloved dies. It becomes something else, something that transcends the physical limitations of space and time. Reach out with that love, Marcus. Let it expand beyond the boundaries of your own grief. At first, nothing happened. Then, gradually, Marcus became aware that he was not alone in his sorrow. Throughout the ship, he could sense the presence of other beings, all carrying their own losses, their own griefs, their own loves. The crew members going about their duties, each one having left behind family and friends on worlds that might already be consumed. Zarathel herself, bearing the weight of responsibility for an entire civilization of refugees. The sensation expanded further. Through the ship's sensors, Marcus found himself touching the minds of countless beings across the galaxy. Some were joyful, some in pain, some struggling with problems he could not even comprehend. But all of them were alive, all of them mattered, all of them deserved to continue existing. And then he felt them, the Devourers. It was like reaching into a pool of ice-cold oil, where every other consciousness he had touched carried some spark of emotion, some glimmer of individual experience. The Devourers were empty. Not just empty, but actively consuming. There were holes in the fabric of existence itself, spaces where life and hope and love went to die. Marcus gasped and pulled back, opening his eyes to find Zarathel watching him intently. "You felt them," she said. It was not a question. How can something like that exist? How can consciousness exist without any emotion, any individual identity? They were not always what they are now, Zarathel explained. Long ago, they were a species much like yours, capable of love and compassion and creativity. But they chose a different path. They discovered that they could extend their own lives by consuming the life force of other beings. At first, it was just a few individuals, outcast from their own society. But the power was addictive, and gradually they corrupted their entire species. She gestured, and the displays showed the history she was describing. Marcus watched in horror as a civilization that had once created beautiful art and music and literature transformed itself into something monstrous, feeding on other species until nothing remained but an endless hunger for more. Now they move through the galaxy like a plague, consuming entire worlds and then moving on to the next. They have existed this way for millions of years, and they will continue until either all life in the universe is exhausted or something powerful enough stops them. And do you think I can stop them? One human who just learned this power exists. Zarathel smiled sadly. Not alone, but your species has something that gives us hope. You have the ability to love even in the face of loss, to hope even when everything seems hopeless. The Devourers cannot understand this. They cannot predict it or defend against it. And if enough of your people can learn to use these abilities, if enough of you can reach out and touch the connections that bind all life together, you might be able to create something they have never encountered before. What's that? A love so strong, so widespread, so unified across an entire planet, that it becomes a beacon of hope for the entire galaxy. A proof that consciousness can choose connection over consumption, compassion over conquest. Marcus felt the weight of impossibility settling on him again. But how do we convince people? How do we get an entire planet to believe in something that sounds like science fiction? You start small, Zarathel said. One person at a time, one connection at a time. And you trust that love is stronger than fear, that the bonds between conscious beings are more powerful than the forces trying to destroy them. Alarms began sounding again, more urgent this time. Through the transparent walls, Marcus could see the Devourers approaching, no longer distant shapes among the asteroids, but a massive fleet of vessels that seemed to absorb the light of the stars themselves. "They're coming," he said, stating the obvious because he did not know what else to say. "Yes," Zarathel agreed, "and this will be your first real test. We cannot outrun them, and our weapons are insufficient to destroy them. But perhaps if you can do what we believe you can do, we will not need to fight them in any conventional sense." She led him back toward the command center, and Marcus could feel the tension throughout the ship. The crew members they passed moved with urgent efficiency, but there was no panic, no despair. These beings had been running from the Devourers for so long that this was simply another day in their long struggle for survival. In the command center, the tactical displays showed the approaching enemy in detail that made Marcus wish he could not see so clearly. The Devourer ships were not built like any vessels he could have imagined. They looked organic, as if they had been grown rather than constructed, their surfaces covered in what might have been scales or might have been some kind of adaptive armor. But worst of all were the tendrils that extended from each ship, reaching out through space like the arms of some cosmic octopus. "Those tendrils are how they feed," Zarathel explained, following his gaze. "They extend them to any planet they wish to consume, and through them they drained not just the life force of every living being, but the very essence of what makes a world capable of supporting life. When they are finished, even the rocks are dead." Marcus watched in fascination and horror as the fleet arranged itself in a complex formation around Zarathel's ship. They were being surrounded, cut off from any escape route. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. Zarathel looked at him for a long moment, and he saw something in her eyes that he had not noticed before. She was afraid, but not for herself. She was afraid for him, afraid that what she was about to ask would destroy him. "I want you to open your mind completely," she said. "Not just to the crew of this ship, not just to distant beings across the galaxy, but to the Devourers themselves. I want you to touch their consciousness and show them what they have lost, what they could have been if they had chosen love instead of consumption." The request was so absurd, so impossible, that Marcus almost laughed. "You want me to try to reform cosmic vampires? To convince beings that have been consuming life for millions of years to suddenly develop a conscience? I want you to try," Zarathel said simply. "Because if you cannot reach them, if there is no spark of their original selves left to be awakened, then we will know that they truly cannot be redeemed. And if that is the case, then the universe will have to find another way to deal with them." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was so quiet that only Marcus could hear her. "But if there is even the smallest chance that they can remember what they once were, if your love is strong enough to penetrate the darkness they have wrapped around themselves, then perhaps we can end this war without destroying an entire species." Marcus looked at the displays showing the Devourer fleet, now close enough that he could see details of their alien architecture. Somewhere inside those ships were beings that had once been capable of love, of art, of all the things that made consciousness beautiful. They had traded all of that for immortality and power, but was it possible that some memory of their original selves remained? He thought of Sarah, of her belief that everyone could be reached with enough patience and compassion. She had never given up on any of her students, no matter how difficult or troubled they seemed. She would find ways to connect with them, to show them that someone cared about their potential for growth and goodness. If he was going to honor her memory, if he was going to use the power that she had been developing when she died, then he had to try to reach these lost souls, no matter how dangerous it might be. "All right," he said. "Tell me what to do." Zarathel closed her eyes and extended her hands toward him again. "Open your mind to mine first. Let me guide you through the initial connection, and then you must go deeper than I can follow. You must reach into the heart of what they have become and find whatever remains of what they once were." Marcus took her hands, feeling the strange, tingling sensation again. This time, though it was stronger, more intense, as if electrical current was flowing between them. The command center around them faded away, and suddenly he was experiencing the universe through Zarathel's senses. Her mind was ancient and vast, filled with memories of worlds and civilizations that had existed long before Earth was even formed. He saw the history of her people, their transformation from a planet-bound species to nomadic refugees, their long search for others who might stand against the darkness. And underneath it all, he felt her loneliness, the terrible burden of being responsible for the survival of her entire race. "Now reach beyond me," she whispered, though her lips did not move. "Reach toward them." Marcus extended his consciousness outward, past the boundaries of the ship, across the void of space toward the Devourer fleet. As he got closer to them, the sensation of cold emptiness grew stronger, threatening to overwhelm him with despair. This was what it felt like to be near beings that had abandoned everything that made life worth living. But then, just as he was about to pull back, he felt something unexpected. Deep within the crushing darkness of their collective consciousness, there was something else. Not light, exactly, but the memory of light. Not love, but the echo of what love had once felt like. They remembered, somewhere in the depths of what they had become, the Devourers still carried the imprint of what they had been before their fall. Marcus reached toward that faint spark with all the love he had ever felt for Sarah, all the hope he had carried for humanity's future among the stars, all the wonder he had experienced looking up at the night sky. And, to his amazement, something responded. For just a moment, across the vast gulf of space and time and corruption, he felt the Devourers remember what it had been like to love something more than themselves. But then the darkness closed in again, and Marcus found himself being pulled into the void of their collective hunger. They had felt his touch, and now they wanted to consume him, to add his life force to their endless feast. He tried to pull back, but their psychic grip was too strong. He was being drawn into the same emptiness that had claimed them, and he could feel his own identity beginning to dissolve into their collective nothingness. Just when he thought he was lost, another consciousness joined with his. Zarathel, lending him her strength and her ancient knowledge. And then another, one of her crew members who had felt the psychic struggle taking place. Then another, and another, until dozens of minds were linked together, all of them pouring their combined will into helping Marcus break free from the Devourer's grasp. But even as they pulled him back to safety, Marcus realized that something fundamental had changed. The Devourers had felt the touch of genuine love for the first time in millions of years, and it had shaken them. Their fleet was no longer advancing in perfect formation. Some ships had stopped completely, while others were moving in confused, erratic patterns. "You did it," Zarathel breathed, her voice filled with awe. "You actually reached them." Marcus opened his eyes, feeling drained but somehow more complete than he had in years. "I touched something in them, but I don't know if it's enough. They're still what they are. Still hungry, still dangerous. But now they're also confused," one of Zarathel's officers reported from his station. "Their attack formation is broken. They're not moving with their usual coordination." On the displays, Marcus could see that this was true. The Devourer fleet was in chaos, ships turning toward each other as if their crews were arguing about what to do next. Some of the vessels were actually withdrawing, pulling back from the engagement entirely. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. Zarathel studied the displays thoughtfully. "Now we see whether the seed you planted can grow into something more. And we prepare for the real work ahead." "The real work?" She turned to look at him, and her expression was both hopeful and determined. "Teaching your people to do what you just did. Teaching them to reach out with love instead of fear when they encounter the unknown. Teaching them to see consciousness as something to be cherished and protected, not conquered and consumed." Marcus felt the enormity of the task ahead of them, but for the first time since Sarah's death, he also felt truly alive. He had a purpose now, a mission that was bigger than his own grief and loss. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Not long," Zarathel admitted. The Devourers will recover from this confusion eventually, and when they do, they will be more determined than ever to eliminate the threat you represent. We must return you to Earth immediately so you can begin preparing your people. As if her words had been a signal, the ship began to move, turning away from the confused Devourer fleet and heading toward the small blue world that Marcus called home. But he knew that when he returned to Earth, he would not be the same person who had left it. He was carrying something new now, something that Sarah would have been proud of. He was carrying hope for the entire universe. The journey back to Earth took 3 days in normal space, though Zarathel explained that time moved differently when traveling at the speeds her ship could achieve. Marcus spent those days learning everything he could about the abilities that were awakening within him and the history of the cosmic war he was now part of. The ship's vast library contained records of thousands of civilizations that had faced the Devourers over the millennia. Some had fought with conventional weapons and been consumed within hours. Others had tried to hide, spreading their populations across multiple worlds, only to watch helplessly as the Dark Fleet methodically hunted down and destroyed every last refuge. But a few civilizations had discovered what Zarathel's people called the Unity Field, the ability to link consciousness across vast distances and create networks of shared purpose and love. These species had managed to resist the Devourers for generations, turning their worlds into beacons of light that the darkness could not extinguish. The key, Zarathel explained as they stood in the ship's observation deck watching Earth grow larger in the viewports, is not individual power but collective connection. One person with these abilities is remarkable but limited. 100 people working together can protect a city. 1,000,000 people linked in purpose and love can shield an entire world. Marcus studied the blue and white sphere of his homeworld, trying to imagine 7 billion people learning to open their minds and hearts to each other in the way he had experienced during his psychic battle with the Devourers. It seemed impossible, but then again, a week ago he would have said the same thing about alien spaceships and psychic powers. How do we start, he asked. How do we convince people that this is real without sounding completely insane? Zarathel smiled, and Marcus noticed that her expressions had become more human-like during their time together, as if she was adapting to his ways of communicating. We start with those who are already partially awakened. Your world has many individuals who possess natural sensitivity to psychic phenomena. Some you call psychics or mediums. Others are simply people who seem unusually empathetic or intuitive. These individuals will be the first to understand and accept the truth. She gestured, and the ship's displays showed locations scattered across Earth's surface, each one marked with a soft glow. We have been monitoring your planet for decades, identifying potential candidates. There are currently approximately 50,000 humans who show signs of natural psychic ability. If we can awaken and train even half of them, we will have the core of a resistance network. Marcus stared at the display, overwhelmed by the scope of what they were proposing. 50,000 people? How do we reach them all? How do we train them without alerting the Devourer agents you mentioned? Very carefully, Zarathel replied, and with help from allies you do not yet know you have. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. But these were different from the warning signals he had heard when the Devourers attacked. These alarms had a welcoming tone, almost musical. What's happening? Marcus asked. Zarathel's expression brightened with something that looked like relief and joy. My sister has arrived. On the main display, Marcus saw another ship approaching theirs. This vessel was smaller than Zarathel's massive world ship, but it was beautiful in a way that made his breath catch. Where Zarathel's ship was functional and powerful, this one was graceful and artistic, its hull covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living artwork. Sister, Marcus asked, Lyra on, the Explorer Queen. While I have been searching for individuals who might help us fight the Devourers, she has been working to establish secret alliances with sympathetic factions on worlds throughout the galaxy. If she is here, it means she has been successful. The two ships joined together in a complex docking maneuver that was like watching a ballet performed with vehicles the size of mountains. When the process was complete, Zarathel led Marcus through corridors that had reconfigured themselves to allow passage between the vessels. Lyron turned out to be even more striking than her sister, if that was possible. Where Zarathel radiated power and authority, Lyron seemed to embody curiosity and wonder. Her hair flowed in patterns of blue and silver, and her eyes were a brilliant green that seemed to contain the depths of alien oceans. Her clothing was less formal than Zarathel's royal garments, more suited for someone who spent her time exploring unknown worlds and meeting new species. So this is the human who managed to touch the Devourer's buried consciousness, Lyron said, studying Marcus with frank curiosity. He is smaller than I expected. Size is not relevant when measuring the capacity for love, Zarathel replied diplomatically. Lyron laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. True enough. Marcus Thompson of Earth, I bring news that will change everything about how we approach the defense of your world. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the air between them. It showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of points of light scattered across its spiral arms. These are the worlds that have agreed to support Earth in the coming conflict, Lyron explained. Not all of them can provide military assistance, but they can offer knowledge, technology, and, most importantly, experienced individuals who know how to use the Unity field effectively. Marcus stared at the display in amazement. All of those civilizations know about Earth, about what's happening here. Word of your breakthrough with the Devourers has spread faster than we anticipated, Lyron said. For the first time in millions of years, someone has made contact with whatever remains of their original consciousness. That gives hope to species that have been living in terror of eventual consumption. She touched a control, and the display zoomed in to show Earth's solar system. Several dozen points of light were scattered among the planets and asteroid belts. These are the advanced teams that are already en route to your world, Lyron continued. Each team consists of individuals who have mastered the Unity field and are experienced in teaching others. They will help you establish training centers in major population areas around your planet. Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Won't people notice alien ships landing all over Earth? Governments tend to react badly to that kind of thing. Who said anything about landing? Lyron asked with a mischievous smile. These teams have been integrating into human society for months. They appear completely human unless you know how to look for the signs of their true nature. Zarathel nodded approvingly. My sister has always been the more subtle of us. While I prefer direct action, she excels at working behind the scenes. How long have you been planning this? Marcus asked, feeling like he was learning about a conspiracy that had been operating under humanity's nose for years. Since we first detected the Devourers moving toward your sector of the galaxy, Lyron replied. We knew we would need help from local populations to mount an effective defense, so we began preparing as soon as we identified Earth as their likely target. The implications of what she was saying slowly sank in. You knew they were coming here, specifically? Why Earth? Why not one of the other inhabited worlds in this region? Zarathel and Lyron exchanged glances, and Marcus got the distinct impression that there was something they had not told him yet. Earth is not just another inhabited world, Zarathel said finally. Your species possesses certain unique characteristics that make you particularly valuable to the Devourers. But those same characteristics also make you potentially more powerful than any other species they have encountered. What kind of characteristics? Marcus pressed. Lyron touched the display controls again, and the view changed to show Earth's history over the past several thousand years. Marcus watched civilizations rise and fall, saw wars and disasters and periods of incredible artistic and scientific achievement. Your species has an unusual relationship with suffering and loss, Lyron explained. Most intelligent species learn to avoid pain and seek pleasure, which is logical and adaptive. But humans have a tendency to find meaning and beauty even in the midst of tragedy. You create your greatest art during times of conflict. You form your strongest bonds through shared hardship, and you develop your deepest wisdom through processing grief and loss. Marcus thought about his own experience with Sarah's death, how the pain of losing her had ultimately opened him to abilities he never knew he possessed. The Devourers feed on despair, Zarathel continued. But humans have this remarkable ability to transform despair into something else, into hope, into love, into determination to protect others from experiencing the same loss. That transformation is something the Devourers cannot understand or defend against. But it also makes humans incredibly appealing as a food source, Lyron added grimly. A species that can generate hope in the face of despair produces a particularly rich form of life energy. The Devourers have been anticipating the conquest of Earth for centuries. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. So we're not just another target. We're a delicacy. In a sense, yes, Zarathel admitted. But that same quality that makes you appealing to them is also what makes you capable of defeating them. If we can teach enough humans to use their natural ability to transform suffering into strength, to connect with others through shared purpose rather than shared misery, we can create a unity field stronger than anything the galaxy has ever seen. The ship's communication systems suddenly activated, and a voice Marcus did not recognize filled the chamber. It was speaking in a language that sounded like music, but the translation matrix allowed him to understand the words. Alert to all vessels in the Terra system. Devourer Scout ships have been detected approaching the outer planets. Estimated time to Earth orbit, 72 hours. The casual conversation about strategy and philosophy was instantly forgotten. They were out of time. 72 hours? Marcus asked, his voice tight with anxiety. That's not enough time to train anyone, let alone 50,000 people. It will have to be, Zarathel said, her expression grim but determined. Lyron, how many of your teams are ready to activate? All of them, Lyron replied. We can have training centers operational in 12 major cities within 6 hours. But Marcus is right. We cannot train large numbers of people in the time we have. Then, we don't train large numbers, Zarathel said. We train a few very intensively and hope that their example inspires others to open themselves to the unity field naturally. Marcus felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders again, but this time it felt familiar. What do you need me to do? Return to Earth immediately, Zarathel said. Go to the people you trust most, the people who knew Sarah, the people who understand loss and love and hope. Start with them. If we can create even a small network of connected minds, it might be enough to protect your planet until more people can be awakened. Lyron was already moving toward her ship's controls. I will coordinate the activation of the training centers. Each team has identified a local human who shows exceptional potential. If we can awaken and connect these individuals quickly, we might have the core of Continental Defense Network. And if it doesn't work? Marcus asked. Then we fight with whatever we have, Zarathel replied simply. And we trust that love is indeed stronger than hunger, hope more powerful than despair. Marcus was transported back to Earth in a small scout ship that was designed to avoid detection by human technology. As he descended through the atmosphere toward the observatory where he had worked for so many years, he tried to prepare himself for what was coming next. He would have to convince his colleagues, his friends, his entire community that everything they thought they knew about reality was wrong. He would have to ask them to open their minds to abilities that science said should not exist. And he would have to do it all while alien scouts were already moving through the solar system, preparing the way for a fleet of cosmic predators that wanted to drain the life from every human on Earth. But as the familiar landscape of his hometown came into view, Marcus felt something he had not experienced since the night Sarah died. He felt ready. The observatory was quiet when he arrived, most of the staff having gone home for the evening. Marcus made his way to his old office, noting with surprise that it had been left exactly as it was when he disappeared. His coffee mug was still on the desk, his jacket still hanging on the back of his chair. Dr. Patricia Williams, the observatory director, found him there 20 minutes later. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, staring at him as if he were a ghost. Marcus? Where have you been? You disappeared 2 weeks ago without any explanation. We filed a missing person report, but the police said your car was found abandoned on the highway with no sign of what happened to you. Marcus looked at his old mentor and friend, this woman who had supported him through his graduate studies and hired him despite his lack of experience. Patricia had also been Sarah's friend, one of the few people who truly understood the depth of their connection. Patricia, he said, standing up slowly, I need to tell you something that's going to sound impossible, but I need you to listen with an open mind because the fate of everyone on Earth depends on whether you can believe what I'm about to say. She stepped into the office and closed the door behind her, her expression shifting from relief at seeing him alive to concern about his mental state. Marcus, you've been missing for 2 weeks. Whatever happened to you? We can get you help. I've been on an alien spaceship, Marcus said simply. I've learned how to use psychic abilities that I didn't know existed. And in about 3 days, this planet is going to be attacked by beings that consume consciousness itself. But there's a way to fight them, and it starts with people like you and me learning to connect our minds in ways that most people think are impossible. Patricia stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Everything he was saying sounded like the delusions of someone who had suffered a complete psychological break. But this was Marcus, the most rational and scientifically minded person she knew. Show me, she said finally. Marcus smiled, remembering how Sarah used to say that Patricia's greatest strength was her willingness to consider evidence even when it challenged her preconceptions. He held out his hands toward her, just as Zarathel had done with him. Think about the night we got the images back from the Hubble telescope showing those distant galaxies. Remember how we stayed up until dawn just looking at them, talking about how many worlds might be out there, how many different kinds of life might be looking back at us. Patricia took his hands hesitantly, and Marcus opened his mind to hers. At first, there was nothing but normal human contact. Then, gradually, he felt her consciousness touching his tentative and uncertain but undeniably real. Through their connection, he shared his memories of the past 2 weeks. Zarathel's ship, the encounter with the Devourers, the realization that Earth was not alone in the universe, but was instead part of a cosmic community that was fighting for its very existence. When he finished, Patricia was staring at him with wonder and terror in equal measure. My God, she whispered, it's all real. We're really not alone. No, Marcus agreed. And now we have to make sure we don't end up extinct. Can you help me contact the others? Tom, Jennifer, Dr. Hassan from the university? Anyone who might be open to this? Patricia nodded, though her hands were shaking slightly. Yes, but Marcus, if what you've shown me is true, if we really only have 3 days, how can we possibly prepare enough people? Marcus thought about Zarathel and her sister, about the alien teams that were already working to establish training centers around the world, about the thousands of civilizations that were depending on humanity to prove that love could triumph over cosmic darkness. We start with the people we can reach, he said, and we trust that when the time comes, the connections we build will spread to others who are ready to open their hearts to something bigger than themselves. Over the next 6 hours, Marcus and Patricia contacted everyone they could think of who might be receptive to what they had to share. Some refused to listen, hanging up the phone or walking away when the conversation turned to aliens and psychic powers. But others were surprisingly willing to consider the possibility that their scientific worldview was incomplete. Dr. Tom Chun, who had been Marcus's closest colleague at the observatory, arrived first. He listened to Marcus's story with the same careful attention he gave to analyzing data from distant quasars, asking detailed questions and requesting demonstrations of the abilities Marcus claimed to have developed. When Marcus successfully connected with Tom's mind and shared memories that only Tom himself should have possessed, the astrophysicist sat back in his chair with a look of amazement. You know, I've always wondered why the universe seems so fine-tuned for life, Tom said slowly. Maybe this is why. Maybe consciousness itself is part of the fundamental structure of reality, not just an accidental byproduct of chemical reactions. Jennifer Santos, a planetary geologist from the university, was harder to convince until Marcus helped her experience the vast perspective of Zarathel's ship traveling between star systems. The sensation of seeing worlds and civilizations scattered across the galaxy like jewels in an infinite ocean of space brought tears to her eyes. "How do we ever think we were alone?" she asked. "How do we convince ourselves that Earth was the only place where life found a way to understand itself?" Dr. Khalil Hassan, who taught philosophy of science, was perhaps the most prepared intellectually for what Marcus was sharing, though even he struggled with the practical implications. "If consciousness can operate independently of the brain to some degree," he said, "then everything we think we know about the nature of mind and reality needs to be reconsidered. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, we need to focus on making sure there is a tomorrow." By midnight, they had assembled a group of 12 people in the observatory's conference room. Marcus looked around at the faces of his friends and colleagues, people who had chosen to believe something impossible because they trusted him enough to consider the evidence with open minds. "This is how it starts," he told them. 12 people willing to connect with each other and reach out to others who are ready to expand their understanding of what's possible. If we can maintain this connection, if we can help it spread to others throughout the city, throughout the country, throughout the world, we might be able to create something that the Devourers have never encountered before. "A planetary consciousness," Dr. Hassan said thoughtfully. "A unified field of awareness that spans an entire world." "Exactly," Marcus agreed. "And we have less than 60 hours to make it happen." As if summoned by his words, the conference room's lights suddenly dimmed, and a figure began to materialize in the space between Marcus and the others. Several people gasped and pushed back in their chairs, but Marcus smiled with relief. "Everyone," he said, "I'd like you to meet Queen Zarathel." The alien queen's appearance in the conference room was even more striking than it had been aboard her ship. Surrounded by ordinary human furniture and technology, her luminescent beauty and otherworldly grace were almost overwhelming. But her voice, when she spoke, carried the same warmth and compassion that had first convinced Marcus to trust her. "Greetings, friends of Marcus Thompson. I bring word from across your world. The awakening has begun.